This video will help explain a particular error that occurs when you're working with functions and variables. So I have here a visualizer that has a very simple program written down, and we're going to step through and see what happens. So right now there's a global frame with memory variable number, and 5 is stored into that storage spot. There is a function definition. There's a pointer to a function object, and right now it's just been created, but we didn't call the function yet. We're about to. And now the function has been called, print input function. So there's going to be another frame here, and within this frame we have this call number equals number plus 1. So let's see what happens. And we get this unbound local error. It says local variable number reference before assignment. So you might say, well, it's not referenced before assignment because above right here we have said what number is 5. So it should say 5 plus 1, but it doesn't. So let's comment this line out, the problem area that caused the error. Let's take it out and just see whether the function cannot see the number variable at all. So let's go through this. Global variable is created, function is created, we call the function, and we print. Look, it prints 5. So functions do see global variables. So what is really the problem with this line? When we have number here, and then we're using the same one over here, as soon as we have a variable created here, it's actually a local variable. And because you're using the same name one more time, it's waiting for that value to be given it first. So what we can do is actually say number equals, so let's say it's 7 here. So if we give it a value first, and then it will see, okay, it's 7 plus 1 that has to be here. So why don't I do another print of number on the bottom as well, and step through this one from the beginning, okay? Just so you could see the difference of local variable versus global variable. So this is a global frame. So this number right here is stored as 5. It's a global variable. It creates a definition of a function. We call this function. Inside the function, this is now a local variable. This local variable happens to have the same name as the previous one, but they're actually not the same memory spots. Okay, so this is stored as 7. Then we go through to the next step. 7 plus 1 gives you the 8, so this number becomes 8. It prints this 8 from line 6. Then I added another print so you could see as soon as the function is finished, that number 7 and 8, it disappeared. The function's done. So what do you think is going to be printed right now? Well, let's see. It prints 5 at the end. So it's as if this number on the inside of the function is just temporary. While the function is running, we call it a local variable. So I think the best practice is to, if you have local variables, try to maybe change them so that they are called something different, because they are actually referencing a different memory location. So let's say you have number 7, and into that particular number 7 you want to add 1, and then you want to print this number. This right here would work just fine, just like it did before, but there will be less confusion now because you're using slightly different variable identifier name. So we have number 5 is a global variable. You create the definition of a function. You're going to print out or call the print input function. Inside the print input, you have a local variable num, 7. You change the value of 7 to an 8. You print this new 8. And then when the function's done, that memory location disappeared. And when you do this last print number, it prints the 5. And there's less confusion here because then you're using different variable names. So to bring home the reason for that error that we had originally, let's get rid of this num equals 7 line from this code. And you'll see that you'll get this local variable num is referenced before assignment. So what we have here is the program is looking for the value of num, and it hasn't been assigned yet, so it cannot do num plus 1 if there isn't such a value. So here's the main idea. Functions can read global variables, but not overwrite them. So let's make this function see the global variable number, which is 5, add 1 to it, and store that into the variable called num. Once the function is finished though, please know that variable num will disappear along with its value 6, and it's not going to be accessible outside of the function. Only global variables are going to be accessible throughout the program. So one question remains then, how do we change the value of a global variable? And there's several ways to do so. Method number 1 of changing the value of the global variable is to say the word global and then the global identifier, which is number, and then proceed to use like what we had before, the place where we had errors before. We will not have the error now. So let's step through this. We have global variable number in the global storage spot. Then we have the function definition created. We are going to now run the function. And when it has this global number, it's going to execute that, and number plus 1. Notice what happened to original number. It's no longer in the local memory spot. It's actually changing the global memory spot from 5 to a 6. And so now it's going to print 6. Function is done. There was nothing inside the function as a new variable anyways. And then it will print the 6 one more time because we had 2 print statements. Method number 2, so let's go back. So let's say we didn't do that. Let's say we had num as before. So if you're going to be using method number 2, it's going to be using local variables and using parameters too. So I have a preference to never have a local variable that's the same name or spelling the same name as the global one. So I'm going to change it back to num. But again, that's the issue that we had here, local error. So what you want to do is pass a parameter here. Let's call num. And when you call this function, you want to give it a value here. So let's say you're giving a value 7. So right now it's not going to actually change the original number, but I just want to explain what happens so far, and then we're going to overwrite the original number 5. So we have global variable 5 stored into identifier number. We have definition created. Now we're calling the function. We have a local variable num 7. Then we're going to add 1 to 7, so num becomes now 8. It prints this local variable 8, and then it disappears from memory, and then the last print would be the original 5. So all I have done here is a part of it, so I have not overwritten yet the global variable 5. So what you could do after you have done this, we can say return num. The last line of your function, you could say we want the value that the function has computed to be used outside of the function. So if you do that, it actually creates a little return value, and it's saying that it's going to return 8. But as you go through this, it's actually not going to do anything with that 8 after, because you didn't capture it anywhere. So if you ever use a return, the place where you called this function is now returning a value. So we can store this value into the original number, and it will actually overwrite it. So let's step through from the beginning. We have global variable 5. We define a function. We call a function. We create a local variable, and it's a local variable 7 because we passed 7 originally here, right? So then to this 7, 1 is added, now it becomes 8. We print this local variable 8, and we return this 8, and this return is the value right here. So this is now 8, and it's being stored into the global variable number. And notice over here it's no longer 5, it's now an 8. And so the last print will print that 8. Now you should not forget that now that the function is not just printing, the function name should be reflective of what it does. So you could say print and add 1. Okay, because that's what it's doing. It's printing and adding 1. So when you call it, you should say print and add 1 to the name. And that I think concludes this little video. So a quick recap: there is 2 ways to change a global variable. One simple way is to declare the variable as global inside of the function, and then it just changes the global variable itself. Or you could use parameters, where you pass an argument 7 into a function. That function accepts that 7 as a parameter number, and then you use a return statement so that you could capture it and give it back or reassign it to the global variable. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful.